Thank you everyone for joining. We're still going to give it a few more minutes.
Someone's trying to still get in.
Is that you and Mr. Kennedy that can see?
I've let everyone in that's asked.
Okay.
It's someone who can't find the link, so I'm just letting them know they can
Oh,
open the
okay.
school calendar.
So should we wait for that person?
Just want to see. Just want to make sure we've got all of the speakers there.
We do, yes.
Yeah.
I've been checking.
As long as we have enough members, we're ready to go.
Okay. So thank you everyone for joining the Sauganash Elementary LSC meeting tonight. So we're going to do a little formal call to order of the meeting. If we can do a quick attendance. So Robert, I know this is your job. If you have any questions about any person who is listed that you don't know their role.
Yeah, I'm scrolling through the attendance list. There's one unknown.
I think that's Tom Pekarski.
It is.
Oh yeah, you're right. It is.
Yes.
And then everybody that's not on the board, I don't know if there's what specific roles are, except for Sam.
Our
Nugent.
special guest. Okay, we have.
I know who Sam Nugent is.
Okay, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 6 special guests this evening.
Let's see. There's one more missing. Do you want me to run down and
We might
or
we might want to identify parents and then possibly, outside of the school community.
So here we have in the chat, Robert, we have Ilana Arogetti.
Yep.
Thank you, Ilana. You're with the Chicago Sun-Times. Okay, can I get it? We don't have anyone else that wants to call out. Everyone else is a parent, I believe. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Approval of the agenda.
Was there anybody from CDOT or the CPS safety that was supposed to be?
Yes, I'm going to introduce them quickly.
Okay.
So,
right.
Okay, we have Alderman Sam Nugent with her assistant, Adam Roberts. We have Carl Schwarzer, Assistant Chief Traffic Engineer with CDOT. CDOT stands for Chicago Department of Transportation. Thank you, Carl. We have Jacob Boxberger, who's a traffic engineer, also with CDOT. We have Crystal Carrington, Crossing Guard Manager, Citywide, CPS. And we have Antoinette Turner, Crossing Guard Team Lead, City North, CPS. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda for this evening?
I'm just going to ask for us to make one change on the agenda. We do not need the budget item that is currently for a internal accounts budget transfer. We're going to hold off.
Thank you, Chris.
With that modification, I make a motion that we approve the agenda.
Second.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to approve the media minutes from the previous meeting?
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes.
I'll second it.
Thank you. So I'm the chair, the LSC chair, Katrina Ramos. I just introduced the members of our special guests that are joining us this evening to talk about safety and security. So the safety committee met recently and we went over some questions that we had after viewing the CDOT traffic study. And we were going to go over those questions and get some answers from the experts. But we appreciate everyone's time. And Alderman Nugent, if you wanted to speak first on behalf of being, the 39th Ward, Alderman, we'd appreciate it.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Chairperson Ramos and Principal Munns for having us here this evening. I'm happy to be here with partners from the Chicago Department of Transportation and Chicago Public Schools. For line of sight, I've also invited State Senator Ron Villavilam and State Representative Mike Kelly tonight, since Peterson, which we're discussing, is an IDOT road. Senator Villavilam is also the chairman of the Senate Transportation Committee. Following the request, submission, and completion of a traffic study on Peterson Avenue, I wanted to bring CDOT to the local school council tonight to present and explain the study, answer questions directly, and help chart the next step. So again, thank you, Chairperson and Principal Munns, for having me tonight. I look forward to learning with you.
Thank you. And for time's sake, we're going to try to limit the safety questionnaire back and forth for 30 minutes. And Sean, do you happen to have the questions? Do you want to read them while we have the agenda?
Yeah, that works for me.
Okay. I think we'll go through the questions and have the experts answer the specific questions, and then we can get feedback at the end.
I'm muted here, sorry. So we have three different sections here. CDOT questions or IDOT, crossing guard questions, and then general questions. So CDOT, why were we not offered other types of a signal system? Can we discuss these other options? RFB, other pedestrian activated lights, digital speed feedback signs, flashing lights around standard crosswalks. There are many options out there, but we need, who's joined us tonight to give us a little bit more intel on that.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Carl Schwarzer, Assistant Chief Traffic Engineer for the City of Chicago. First, I just want to thank you all for being an active and engaged community. CDOT has teams that can respond to situations like this, but we really don't know to do that unless the community lets us know. So I certainly appreciate that you're all engaged like this and let us know about issues. One topic I just want to touch on to kick us off here is this concept of this being an IDOT route. So Peterson Avenue is under IDOT jurisdiction. There's a lot of IDOT jurisdiction streets throughout the city of Chicago, and typically CDOT has maintenance over those streets, but a lot of the decision-making process for any changes on those streets do have to go through a formal process with IDOT when changes are proposed on those segments. And I don't want to give you the impression that IDOT is obstructing us from doing anything. They certainly are well aware of the need for safety improvements citywide, statewide, and they're very sensitive to that. It's just that with the way that they have to stick to their own policies. It's a little bit more of a cumbersome process than the city of Chicago typically faces. So it may be a little slower, but IDOT is not trying to stop anything from happening. They just have to follow their own procedures. So with that said, jumping into this idea of other signal systems, the first one listed is the RRFB, or the Rapid Rectangular Flashing Beacons. These are, appear to be traditional pedestrian signs that have a push button that when it's pressed, there's beacons that flash to alert vehicles to the presence of a pedestrian. Historically, those have not been easy to implement on IDOT routes, which is why it was not initially included in our analysis. I think in the agenda, you even have a link to some news articles about the recent memorandum of understanding that we have with IDOT. We're very excited and encouraged that CDOT and IDOT are actually kind of working to streamline the process to implement certain procedures. RRFBs are not specifically addressed in that current memorandum, but we are encouraged that, we are working to streamline and make this as seamless as possible to get these implemented. With that said, at this location, there would be a lot of challenges with getting RRFBs installed at this location. Notably, you want to have really good sight distance to those signs. If the sign is out there, but it's obscured by trees, signs, street light poles, that can create a lot of issues with, drivers may not see the signs at all and be aware of a pedestrian being there, and pedestrians may be overconfident thinking since the sign is there, the car is definitely going to stop. So with that in mind, there's a lot of challenges with the trees that are out there. Quite a few trees could have to be removed. The push buttons themselves have to be ADA compliant, which could require modifications in the median or the sidewalk to create that ADA compliance. Those signs have to get power from locations. If they're solar, again, trees may obscure that. So while IDOT is, more accommodating to discussing the idea of RRFBs, it's still no guarantee that they're going to be applicable at this location. Another concern related to that is the spacing between these signs and upstream and downstream traffic signals, which you have at Cicero and at Forest Glen. So if there's situations where cars are backing up from Cicero through where the RRFB is, or vice versa, backing up from the RRFB through Cicero, those are also factors that have to be considered in if these signs can be installed. So all of that said, is that something that we could take a closer look at, but is by no means going to be a guaranteed recommendation coming out of that. Looking at these other items, so a digital speed feedback sign, that would be a sign that has a radar unit, it detects vehicles on the road, and actually displays their current speed. Often they'll have like an indication that you're going the correct speed if you're below the speed limit, and then it'll flash your speed if you're going over. First, I want to note that there's currently an enforcement camera at Kilpatrick already that actually takes readings and can issue citations based on speeding. These radar speed feedback signs, or these digital speed feedback signs, they are not enforcement cameras. They just display speeds as an advisory message to drivers. Our biggest concern with them at this location is they can be actually a distraction to drivers. If we put an RRFB, or excuse me, the radar speed feedback sign near one of these crosswalks, there's a real possibility that a driver could be looking up at the speed indicator rather than looking down at the crosswalk, where they need to be looking to see if pedestrians are present. So that's certainly a factor in where we place those signs. There's also a note in here about flashing signs around signs that are out there. Perhaps as you've traveled other places, you've seen signs that have LEDs mounted within the sign. That's not something we use in the city of Chicago. We don't have contracts in place currently to get those materials, and we don't have maintenance in place to maintain them after they're out there. It's just not something we do. The issue is that those typically need a power source. They often have a battery. So not only do we not necessarily have the ability to just purchase them upfront, there's also questions of who maintains them after they're out there. And again, it gets back to that topic of is it distracting to drivers to have all these flashing lights when they really should be looking down at the crosswalk? So that's just kind of to touch on these specific ones that were mentioned here. I don't know if there's any additional questions regarding that.
Thank you. I think the last question is, these are some options that were listed. Do you have any other suggestions on what may be available that wasn't a part of the study?
Well, so the items listed here were kind of a few items that were not addressed in the study. In the study itself, we did address several other of the types of signs that could be installed, as far as in-street stop signs or stop here for pedestrian sides on the sides of the road. It's kind of detailed in the traffic study why we don't necessarily support the use of those types of signs at these locations. And given the interest of time here, I don't know if we want to revisit that now or just continue with the questions. Okay.
Thank you, though. I guess number 2. So we know that the speed camera is there and we know it's collecting data. What's that impact?
Well, so those signs are, or that system is managed by other groups within CDOT, and with this being an IDOT route, they may have jurisdiction as well. With that said, I was able to pull some example speed data from that sign. It is collecting data continuously. And just a note about those enforcement cameras, per state law, they really can only issue citations during school days when children are present. So with that said, it's not enforcing overnight. It's not issuing tickets outside of school hours, but it is still collecting data. So we can see 24-hour data. So from that, I went ahead and looked. And when we're talking about speeds, we typically base kind of our design on what we call the 85th percentile speed, where 85% of vehicles are either going at this speed or slower. And it kind of leaves out a few of the outlier high speeds that could happen throughout a 24-hour period. So in this case, I can see that in both directions during both the AM and PM school operations, the 85th percentile speed on Peterson Avenue is actually 22 miles per hour or less. That's indicating that these signs are pretty effective at keeping people from speeding during those actual school operation times, where the posted speed would be 70 for this, or excuse me, 20 for the school zone. So just based on that data, we can see that there's not necessarily a speeding issue across the board. I'm sure there's a few outlier speeders that are out there. The cameras are issuing citations, and ultimately, that's what's coming out of the speed camera. I know there's some questions about signals later. I don't know if we want to save that for when we get to that portion of the questions.
So is that number 5 or 6 in the CDOT questions? Yeah, I think they're all related.
Right.
So
I guess I kind of addressed now, 2 through 4. We don't necessarily see speeding during those school hours. I do see a question just came in. What speed are the cameras issuing citations for? I believe legislatively there's a number, and actually Alderman Nugent may actually be aware of this. I believe it's 24 is where they would issue the citations currently.
That, without having the code in front of me, I believe the speed limit during school hours is 20, and then the citation, you're accurate, I believe. Or is it 26 miles? It's 6 miles over.
Oh.
I don't know. I don't have the code in front of me, but I know this. I'm 99% sure the speed limit is 20 when children are present.
The speed limit is 20, and I just know there is a small leeway before they issue citations, which unfortunately I don't believe we know that off the top of our heads.
6. I think it's 6, but we'd have to triple check it.
We can have that as a takeaway. Thank you.
So are there any other specific questions about speeding before I kind of discuss this question 5 regarding stop signs and signals?
Is there any data on the number of citations that are actually issued?
I could, I'll make a note of that, and I will request that and see, what's publicly shareable from that. I don't have access to the data directly, and I'm also not sure, what information is available publicly, but I will certainly ask for you.
Thanks.
And then Carl, you can actually send that to me and we can include that in the newsletter.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
I actually did have a question for you, Carl. I think the thing about the digital speed feedback that we were talking about,
Mhm.
the reason.
Oh, Lori, you froze.
Uh-oh.
Well, just for while she's
Okay.
frozen for a
Yeah.
second, confirming my staff did confirm that they issued the citation at 6 miles over and it was put in the link.
So it starts at 6. Starts at 26 miles per hour. Okay, Lori, you're back.
Okay.
Can you start over?
Yes. So I was wanting to clarify with you the difference between the speed cam versus the digital speed feedback sign. And I think, in our heads, we're thinking that the feedback sign would help to slow people down, because the speed camera is just catching speed and issuing tickets. And as you mentioned, that was sort of a delayed impact on the driver. But I know when I see a digital speed feedback sign, I slow down immediately if I see my speed is above it. So I think that was the logic behind putting that in as an option and a question. Is there
Sure.
anything that you can add to that to help distinguish the two?
Yeah, well, so first, those enforcement cameras are managed by a separate team. I already have the request for the citation data. I'll have a broader conversation with them about effectiveness. I think they can see metrics over time. I don't know how far it goes back. They could maybe see, over time is the level of citations changing. But what I can say is based on, my glance at the spot data that has been provided to me, that there's not a widespread speeding issue currently. So if the signs are already effective, just currently having the enforcement sign, people know that the enforcement camera, people know they could be ticketed. Perhaps the worst speeders have already been ticketed. With all of that in place, it appears that currently the vast majority of people are driving at or near that 20 mile per hour speed limit. So again, I'll get further data from them. But if in any case, if we were going to add the feedback signs as well, it gets to that question about where can we place them that they will slow people down without distracting from the crosswalks.
Thank you.
Okay, and then I think the last question, we're coming up on 15 minutes already. So the crash data.
Well, I'll speak just a little bit to the question about signals and stop signs. So when we're installing signals or stop signs, that's typically governed by something called the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, or the MUTCD. That's a national standard. IDOT and CDOT both comply with the provisions of that document. This being an IDOT route, this would ultimately fall under their specific procedures for warranting. So I can just say generally how the signal warranting process works, but when it comes to specifically this location, that ultimately will be kind of a question for IDOT and how they implement these traffic signal warrants. The most common warrant that IDOT uses would be the 8-hour vehicular warrant, which requires that both the major street and the side street have a certain level of vehicular volume for at least 8 hours in a 24-hour period. We don't have count data at this location right now, but we just know from context that this is not going to meet that 8-hour warrant. There's a number of other warrants that can be tested, including some for pedestrian impacts, school impacts, but I can't necessarily speak to those warranting criteria, especially on behalf of IDOT. But I would say just typically with this location, signals at both Cicero and Forest Glen, it's pretty unlikely that this is going to warrant a signal really per any of the signal warrants. And then even if it did, I just want to make a note that in the city of Chicago, getting a signal implemented can be quite pricey, and in some cases actually gets into the range of about $750,000 to implement a new signal. So if this is a signal that doesn't meet warrants, may not be, there's certain issues if you put signals in where they're not warranted, and then the high price. It certainly needs to be discussed with IDOT, but this does not appear to be a likely location for a traffic signal. Similarly, with this being a major street, multiple lanes in each direction, very high volume, it's going to be very difficult to implement a stop sign on that. And really just one note that both signals and stop signs, the MUTCD is clear that these are not meant to be speed control treatments. They're really supposed to address other issues. So if, again, if speeds are part of the concern, that's not really a factor when it comes to warranting stop signs or signals. Any other questions on signals before I address crash data?
No, that was very thorough. Thank you.
Thank you. So finally, when it comes to crash data, the city of Chicago has a system called the Advanced Traffic Management System, or the ATMS. It's an online database that houses all sorts of internal information. And through that system, we can actually search crash data by location. So, we searched out this intersection. It pulls all crash data through a time period that we specify. And one of the fields that is in there is pedestrian involvement. So, if the crash report indicates in the actual police report that a pedestrian was involved, that is marked, we can pull that data. Now, all of this data is police reports. So if there's an incident that does not get reported to the police and does not ultimately get a police report put into the system, that's not going to be data we receive. So just a note on that we do have a system that can identify pedestrian involvement, but again, it's only going to pull actual police reports that were produced.
Sorry, what was the name of the database again?
It's the ATMS, the Advanced Traffic Management System.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Carl? Thank you, Carl. Much appreciated. Let's move on to crossing guard area. Oh, so there's parents that would like to ask questions on CDOT. So normally I think we wait until the end of the meeting for public comment, but we're focusing on allowing our guests to speak now. So please do ask your questions. So Abigail?
Hi. I just have a couple of questions. We've talked a lot about speed, but I think the one thing that's not really being addressed is that the Illinois crosswalk law is being violated pretty much every day. As a parent that uses that crosswalk, I am constantly seeing drivers stop in the crosswalk, roll through the crosswalk, roll through one crosswalk, approaching the other crosswalk, while myself and kids, and there are kids that are using this crosswalk that are unaccompanied by parents. So I'm wondering if you can address that. Like, how do we get people to understand that they cannot be in the crosswalks?
Sure, that's a great question. So when we talk about holistic transportation safety, we like to talk about the 3 E's: engineering, education, and enforcement. Obviously, I'm a traffic engineer representing CDOT. The biggest component of the 3 E's we address are that engineering factor. We're talking about signage and those types of implementations. Beyond that, you have the education and the enforcement. Enforcement, obviously, we've talked about the speed citation cameras, but of course, enforcement also includes, police presence and issuing tickets through that. But it could also be coupled with both enforcement and education from crossing guards, which I believe we'll have an opportunity for a crossing guard representative to speak tonight. And really, it is about educating the public about the risks and consequences of not stopping for pedestrians. Of course, there is the risk of getting the ticket, and of course, the risk to public safety. And there's only so far from the engineering perspective where we can take that concept of keeping people out of the crosswalk. So we do need the involvement from the crossing guards, CPS, CPD, and really all of us working together to try and address this. And unfortunately, it's not an easy question. And we really just do our best to kind of put the best opportunity out there for these safe situations to be present.
Is there an opportunity to use the signs that we've seen around the city that say that this is a, respect the Illinois crosswalk law and this is a crosswalk?
I believe our traffic study addressed some of the issues with those types of implementations on this type of street. Just with the multiple lanes in both directions creates challenges in how those signs can be implemented. And then obviously being an IDOT route, it has to be compliant with how they typically would allow these signs to be used as well. So we're going to continue this discussions with IDOT, and I encourage you to reach out to your ward. I'm not sure if the study's been shared publicly, but it is a topic we could address. But I think in the interest of time, I don't want to necessarily repeat everything that was in the traffic study already.
Yeah, and it does take some reading to go through the report and understand it. Joshua, you're next. Or Abby, was that all? Sorry. Okay, thank you. Joshua?
So we do know that that crosswalk laws are being broken on a almost daily basis, and we know when, we know where. For the leadership, have we asked for police presence during these hours to help with safety? And if we have, is there a reason the police are refusing? And if we haven't, what's the reason we have not requested police presence?
I could speak to this. I always go to your CAPS meetings and we bring it up at CAPS. That's something that the community feels strongly about. I'd encourage you to go to CAPS as well. I'm not the police. I'm not in charge of their scheduling. I don't know if it's possible for the commander to deploy an officer at the crosswalk every day. They don't typically do that to schools. In the 39th ward, my experience has not been that we've been able to have an officer at each school every day. They just don't have the manpower for it. Sometimes they will give special attention to schools. For example, if there's a speeding issue or whatever it might be, they can usually put a car there, here and there. But in my experience, I haven't been able to get a full-time detail just based on capacity issues. We have nine CPS schools in the 39th ward.
And I'm also just going to piggyback on Alderman Nugent's comments. Oftentimes, the police officers are deployed to high schools so that they do get a little bit more extra support as they have larger schools and possible more complications. But once we have done this in the past, it would be for maybe one day where a police officer is able to sit at the intersection, but it's not consistent, and it's not. It's I don't know if it's the word is doable, but we could ask. Absolutely, I have no problems doing that. But again, it will not be on a daily basis.
Okay, Megan.
Hi, this is Eric Chung. Actually, I just have a few questions. I noticed obviously there's been several options that have been rejected as far as electronic signage is concerned, and possibly crossing guards or whatever it might be. I mean, what exactly is CDOT's position and recommendation then for the situation? Because obviously the citizens want to have some sort of action taken, and I mean, we mean, if whether it's cutting some trees down to eliminate a blockage in vision, or whether it's adding a few extra signs where it maybe not digital or whatever, or possibly even the option of the concrete median, where obviously it would take civilian dollars to do. Maybe not at the price of $65,000, maybe at a cheaper price. What exactly is CDOT's number one option or recommendation to do about it? And number two, if we were to go a route with the median option, is IDOT having to approve this funding as well?
So just to touch on the recommendations in the study, it sounds like you're familiar that we did recommend a pedestrian refuge island on the west leg at Kilpatrick. Right now, the median itself actually comes out and covers the crosswalk on the east side of the intersection, but on the west side of the intersection, the crosswalk is just out on the asphalt space. So we did recommend that could be constructed to look like the east side and actually have refuge on both sides. It creates what we call a two-stage crossing, where really you're just worried about one direction of cars at a time. Then you can gather yourself in the median and then continue on. We also do recommend investigating some tree removal just to improve sight distances around the intersection. And we have proposed some additional pedestrian signage, both on the sidewalks and on the median. And those would just be traditional pedestrian signs, but with angled arrows down to address where the crosswalk is. And those could be implemented fairly quickly after we coordinate with the ward. And typically that just the sign installation would not require any funding at all. Typically can just come out of our safety related maintenance funds. When it comes to the question of funding for something like the pedestrian refuge island, IDOT would have some say in what that design looks like, but they wouldn't necessarily be that concerned about the funding source. And typically the funding is not going to come from IDOT. It's going to come from another source. The ward will have several tools at their disposal to investigate what that funding could be. CDOT can help coordinate potential grants if necessary. But the funding source would ultimately dictate how quickly it could possibly be done. I don't know if Alderman Nugent would like to get into any of that tonight. Probably not necessary, but if you'd like to speak to it.
No, I mean, we'd have to just determine what is the best option that the school, the LSC likes, and in the community. And I have finite resources, and as you can imagine, a lot of people are looking to have projects funded. It's conversations that I'm happy to have with State Senator Villabalam and Representative Kelly and myself. Just to, we always, if this is something the community wants, we will work together to try to find funding. But I would like to work in partnership with those colleagues based on whatever the LSC feels is most appropriate.
I have a couple of comments based on the parent questions. I have actually spoken to the commander's office, and they just do not have the manpower to send out anybody to sit at our intersection. And they've been consistent in saying that they've been very responsive with me, and they've offered as many suggestions as possible. They have us on the list of possibly sending somebody out, irregularly, maybe once or twice, just to kind of evaluate the situation. But they definitely do not have manpower at this time to put someone at our intersection. And then regarding IDOT versus, CDOT and some of the information that was given about that, I spoke with Jonathan at IDOT. He's in the traffic department, and he was telling me that the best thing for me to do at this point would be to file a form online with IDOT, and that would initiate conversations between IDOT and CDOT regarding our study to help move that along and get everybody talking together. So I've already filed that submission, and he told me if I hadn't heard anything by this Friday, meaning Friday the 10th, that I should get back in touch with him to see, if maybe it was lost in transmission or something. But he was expecting to have some information this week. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Okay, so that was 30 minutes with CDOT. If we can, I'm going to put a 15-minute timer for the crossing guard discussion. So let's move over to Crystal and Antoinette and helping us to answer the crossing guard questions that were listed.
Hi there. My name is Crystal Carrington. I am the crossing guard manager for Chicago Public Schools. And we did take a look over the questions that were brought forward. And so for question number 7, due to budget constraints as of right now, we are unable to approve any new or additional posts throughout the district. And pretty much we will add the concern or the request for Peterson and Kilpatrick to be added as an intersection. But as of right now, due to budget constraints, we cannot promise that at this time. And I don't know if anything else needs to be discussed for question number 7.
So I think we're getting a
Joshua?
question from, if the budget is this year, how do we go in looking at next year for potential?
So we need to make this argument for, I think we send everything, starting in March, we start to do a review. And pretty much that's what happens is in March, we will review for the upcoming fiscal year. And at that time, we then present all of our concerns. We share that with leadership, which is Jadine Chow, and then she takes that up to budget and her leadership as well, just to see what can be approved. So we have already added Peterson and Kilpatrick to our list of concerns.
And then do you hear back on all of the process by the time school starts in the fall?
Yes, we will get a list based on what is determined we can approve, and then we would notify administration it has been approved or it's not approved.
Okay, and Crystal, I'm just going to jump in here.
Mhm.
Are all CPS schools provided a crossing guard? In other words, do all schools have crossing guards currently?
No. So we only support elementary schools, and not all CPS elementary schools have crossing guards.
So all of that is done as part of your review in March. What determines the necessity for the crossing guard?
Correct. So we pretty much have this running list and it's based off of concerns that we receive from administration, from the crossing guards, from parents. We kind of take all of that into account, and then leadership and budget then makes that overall decision on whether or not we can provide this crossing guard or provide an additional or a new post to a school.
Okay, if you can keep
Go
us in
ahead.
the loop and let us know if you need anything from us.
Definitely.
Abigail.
Okay, so if other than budget, are there any other obstacles to getting a crossing guard at this intersection?
Other than budget, I do have a few safety concerns, which we will talk about. So the only issue is that traffic concern coming from, where is it from? Cicero has a light, correct? And so does Forest Glen. So just being in the middle of those two traffic lights, if there's not going to be a stop sign, if there's no other signage that's going to be implemented, having a crossing guard at that intersection will then also cause traffic there, right? And it causes a concern for us safety-wise with putting a crossing guard at an intersection that is kind of in between two lights and on a busy street to cross students somewhere where there is no stoplight. So one thing that I discussed with Principal Munns was, telling your students to cross at those lights is going to be the best and the safest way to make sure that they're getting to and from school safely. There's a crossing guard located at Forest Glen and Peterson, so we would like for all of the students to kind of cross at that intersection because we know, one, there's a stoplight and there's a crossing guard.
Joshua.
So yeah, I've noticed the crossing guard at that intersection, and that intersection isn't a problem. The crossing guard seems unnecessary there, where clearly
And there's a light.
There's a light protecting it. And we see that people are violating the crosswalk laws. That's where we need a crossing guard for help.
Also, if you're concerned for the crosswalk, the crossing guard safety, clearly, there is a problem. So I guess, why are we concerned about that, but not the children crossing every day?
Because I believe we should be asking and kind of putting in the parent newsletter to have the students cross where the crossing guard is located.
Then why is there a crosswalk there to begin with?
That I'm not sure of. That was not something that we
And it's not
implemented.
safer at Cicero and Peterson to cross there.
You said it's not safer?
No, it is not safer at Cicero and Peterson when cars are not supposed to go right on red and they're constantly going right on red. They are flying off the highway. There are constantly been drag racing going on. There have been gunshots fired there. It is not, I am going there by myself sometimes to go to the grocery store, and I have a hard time even taking my kids with me on foot. It is not safer at Cicero and Peterson. There are multiple lanes and people are speeding through to get on the 94 or getting off the 94.
Okay. So at this time, just because based on, and this kind of leads into question number 8, we inherited the crossing guard program from OEMC. So the locations in which crossing guards are located now, their intersections and their posts were all determined based off of what we received from OEMC. So
And when did that change?
I'm sorry?
When did the switch change from OEMC to?
We took over at the end of 2020, so technically January 2021.
Okay,
Crossing
thank
guards
you.
were with CPS, no problem. And so with that being said, like the decisions to move the crossing guard, that is a decision that can be made amongst leadership, administration. However, we also have to take into account that we have to notify the crossing guard of this move, right? And if the crossing guard then tells us that they feel unsafe at a new intersection, what are we supposed to do as employers, correct? Like, how am I supposed to support my employee if they're unsafe at an intersection and I'm moving them, telling them, hey, go here instead of being at the stoplight, which we know, we just pulled up their incident reports. There have been no incident reports reported to us from that intersection. So we would assume that everything is running smoothly. That is also why we would ask to push to have the students cross at that intersection at Forest Glen and Peterson.
But to further that point, Miss, if there's no issue of safety as of right now at that intersection for pedestrian crossing, then why would there be a problem with the crossing guard feeling unsafe?
Feeling unsafe where? I'm talking about the new intersection.
That's what I'm talking about. If we replace the crossing guard at the intersection of Knox and Peterson, which is or Kilpatrick and Peterson, whatever, which is 2 blocks away from Forest Glen right now where the crossing guard is. And there, you're saying as currently right now, there's no danger to safety or there's no danger to pedestrian crossing. Why is the issue then we're concerned about the safety of our crossing guard? Shouldn't it be we're also concerned about the safety of the kids?
We are definitely
right. So, but if you're saying we can't go and put a crossing guard in a new intersection if they don't feel safe. Why would they not feel safe there if there has been no incidences reported in the last 2 years, like you just stated?
I was not referring to.
I think. Sorry, if I could jump in. I think she's saying because the light aids the safety. So you're crossing on a green or you're crossing on a red, which is making it easier for the crossing guard to have this car stopped based on the light, and then the crossing guard is basically there to confirm the kids get across the street safety. So
there are no statistics for Peterson and Kilpatrick right now. 0. Correct. Right. That's going to be part of her review in March. That would start in March.
Correct.
Yeah. Can you involve us in that process, please?
Sure.
Okay. I think that's the next step. If you inherited where they're already at, we're asking, we'd like it to be here. Your process starts in March for budgeting. We want to be involved in that process and see what happens.
Not a problem. And I've already discussed with Antoinette, who is also on the call. She's the supervisor for that intersection and for your school. She will be doing a traffic study, and that's just kind of taking a look at that intersection in which you're requesting, which is Peterson and Kilpatrick, right? So we'll come out, we'll do a traffic study on our own, and then determine from there, like, yes, definitely a crossing guard is needed here, right? So that is definitely what we can do even that before March, before we get to leadership and budget. We can do that traffic study before then.
Okay, perfect.
So I'm just going to circle back just because historically I've been at Sauganash for 23 years. There was a crossing guard there, not the current crossing guard, but there was a crossing guard at Peterson and Kilpatrick, and they did move the crossing guard position to Forest Glen and Peterson because it was unsafe. We have consistently put in the newsletter for parents to cross at the light with the crossing guard. I believe crossing at Cicero and Peterson is much easier than, I would even say, Cicero and Hiawatha. So I think there's a couple things, and Crystal, I may work with you with that. But I'm going to say again, there are still CPS schools out there that don't even have a crossing guard. So I just want us to make sure that we are cognizant of that. And I also want us to be cognizant of the fact that once we get these reports and these studies and a decision is made, we can't keep coming back just because we disagree with the study. So we have to be respectful for the studies as long as they are done well and that they are done accurately and provide us the information that we're looking for. I just want us to make sure that we're respectful for both CDOT, the aldermen, and safety and security. Once they determine a decision, We have to allow them to make that decision and trust on that. I do know that there are quite a few families that do cross the other students. And Crystal, we have provided flags that are also supportive for the families as well. Again, I'm going to reiterate, crossing at lights are much more safer than trying to cross either Cicero and or at Peterson and Kilpatrick.
So Joshua, I think that's the whole process, right? CDOT's doing the traffic study. We're working with the aldermen. We're working with the cross guards. It's a multi-pronged approach that we're all trying to take to see what can be done to make that intersection safer. We're not excluding any options out there. Okay, and then do we have time for some general questions? But we appreciate your support, Crystal.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I don't know if we want to even talk about, so if we're gathering all this information, right, and we're taking all these questions today, you can't really answer next steps of budget, who's going to pay for what right now. So maybe Alderman Nugent, you can tell us what are the next steps of, we have this meeting, we have all these ideas, we come together, and here's what we ask for, and we meet with you to say, okay, here's our list, what's feasible, what's not. Looks like the crosswalk or the crossing guard is going to take some more time, but in the meantime, the other options that CDOT presented in their study, what happens next?
Well, a couple of things. I needed to learn from CDOT tonight, like you guys did, and the folks from safety. I think I have to go through the report again. I'd like to see what the what CPS safety comes back with, and whether or not, I think obviously there's a question of whether or not it's safe to have a crossing guard at Kilpatrick or Knox. I'm not sure what intersection y'all are reviewing, but that will dictate if we do additional traffic calming measures at that intersection. If we don't think a crosswalk should be crossing children there, then that bit is, we're not going to be changing the infrastructure there. That seems to, I'd like to have CPS and Crystal come back with a little more. I think I'd like to also, if it's my understanding, that IDOT is coming into the play too. Is that, Carl, is that what you were saying?
Well, just ultimately with the IDOT jurisdiction here, infrastructure changes and some of the other signage items we touched on would have to be reviewed and approved by IDOT. So if ultimately we were proceeding with something that fell under that criteria, that coordination with IDOT would occur.
Okay. And I think, obviously tonight, I think perhaps Chairman Ramos, if you want to talk to your LSC, let this sink in tonight and determine, based on what Carl and Crystal said, what you guys think would be the doable or attainable thing, and let me know. I will happily talk to Senator Villabalam and Representative Kelly. But I would like to see, I think it's critical that we hear what CPS Safety and Security says about moving the crosswalk, because that could trigger additional traffic calming as well. So I'm in a little bit of a holding pattern because I need to hear what they say too. And also I'd like to hear, when you meet with your LSC, what you guys think is the most important based on tonight's conversation.
Thank you. We do have the senator represented. So State Senator Brahm.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I apologize. We have a house under the weather, but I just wanted to just chime in to say I too, really appreciated being a part of this conversation, and I will look forward to circling back with everyone to do my part and our part from the state. I talk to IDOT every other day, and so I'm happy to do what's needed to make sure that all of our youth are safe, and that's the number one priority. So thanks again for having me. I'll follow up with folks on the call, and I'm seeing IDOT tomorrow afternoon, so I can start the process there of working to get what we need from them.
Excellent, much appreciated. Abigail.
I feel like I just need to ask a maybe it sounds basic question, but from my understanding, there are pedestrian crosswalks and there are school crosswalks. And the crosswalk at Kilpatrick and Peterson is designated as a school crosswalk. Don't school crosswalks afford different attention and different laws, that they're treated differently than a normal pedestrian crosswalk? I can understand if it was just pedestrian that you would ask people to walk, you know, what is essentially 6 or more blocks out of their way. And let's be honest, I mean, in the morning, you have small kids. Most of you have had young children at some point. It's not all of us have the extra 10 to 15 minutes to add that walk. And so if you go somewhere and you see a sign that says school crossing, you think that's a crossing for the school. And so it's very confusing as a citizen and a person of the neighborhood that you're going to designate this as a school crosswalk, and yet it's not safe. I didn't ask a question there other than, don't we afforded different measures? What's the law? And I know we might be able to answer that question at the moment, but you can understand, I think, what's confusing on our end as parents.
Well, I can at least share that, from a, signage and striping standpoint, when a crosswalk is in a school zone, and that's kind of defined by city code, kind of defines what school zone means. But obviously, in theory, it's close to a school where people are going to be crossing a street. So in those cases, there are the special pedestrian signs that indicate school. So there's a special school pedestrian sign. And then as well, you can use the continental style crosswalk striping that's out there. That's more of the ladder style rather than the just parallel lines. And then, of course, the way that tickets can be issued, the citations are different inside of school zones. But outside of that, I mean, I still leave it to, Crystal and her team, who are school crossing professionals, to really touch on kind of best practices for crossing on a major street such as this one.
Crystal, did you have any comments, or we just leave it with the study?
So I was going to say, I actually have, we have a best practices presentation or deck that we share with schools whenever we have any concerns. I can always share that, and that can be shared with parents and whatnot, just so that you can see what the training is for crossing guards. And one thing that we like to bring up often is that crossing guards are not controlling vehicular traffic. They're only monitoring and assisting with pedestrian traffic, right? So that was another reason why I believe, and I can only imagine why the issue at Peterson and Kilpatrick really came up, was because crossing guards are not supposed to be really controlling the vehicular traffic, just kind of making that gap in traffic so that students can cross to and from school. So I am reaching out to OEMC. That's one thing that I'm working on right now, is reaching out to them to see if they can provide any information as to why that crossing guard was moved originally and when that actually took place. And then I will use that towards when we go to budget and when we go to leadership, just to let them know, like, this is why they were moved. These are the concerns that I'm hearing from the parents at that school right now. So just gathering a few things, but I can share the deck, the training deck, with administration, and then that can be passed on as you wish.
Yes, please. Thank you.
No
Chris,
problem.
do you remember the year? Testing your skills.
You know what? I don't. It was quite a bit ago, and I do know that 17th District did have it before the OEMC department. But I'm going to probably go back close to 10 to 15 years ago.
Okay, thank you. We're coming up on an hour, so much for 30 minutes, but sincerely appreciate the time that everyone was able to give. And we did get through a lot of questions, a lot of back and forth feedback, which is really important for all of our parents and the community and this as LSC members. So much appreciated to Senator Rahm, Alderman Nugent, Carl, Jacob, Crystal, and Antoinette. We really appreciate all of your support and joining our meeting.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. It was great to be here. I learn from Carl every time he gives a presentation. He knows it, and Crystal as well. And Chairman, look forward to hearing from you. What you guys think is appropriate. I'll work with the senator and representative, and we'll figure out something. We want folks to be happy. And again, I'm grateful for your time and consideration tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
having us. We appreciate it.
Okay.
Well, hope your principal report short.
You know what? I'm going to back up a little bit. We've got the budget committee, I think, after.
Yep. Budget and then annex and then PTO.
So I'm going to just go with the budget, and Deepak, you can jump in, or Robert if need be, but we are taking a look at the current budget and trying to make needs for this year, the remaining of this year, and getting additional instructional materials. At this time, we are not going to ask for a book transfer, which is a budget transfer from internal accounts to our budget. So we are okay for that. I'm going to just jump into Annex 2, update a few of you on the Annex Committee. For Annex 2, we did get some feedback from PBC, and we had asked that the campus be renumbered correctly. When they put in Annex 1 does not align with classroom numbers from the first floor to the second floor. So I've asked that it be corrected, and an additional upgrade in the existing original building for all telephone and intercom requests. So CP has honored our request that they will go ahead without the PBC's recommendation, and that we will be numbering the building from Annex 2 through the original building to Annex 1. So we are working on getting classroom numbers up and going for the annex. So I was happy to report CPS is very much supporting us with having the correct classroom numberage for the entire campus.
That's great news. Yeah.
And is it correct that the annex is 50% completed?
Oh,
Elaine
boy.
might know.
I don't know if it's the number or the percentage. I just like the fact that we're vertical and we keep moving forward, and I can keep hearing they are working through these cold days. They are working through, weather, and they are working on Saturday. So I do know that that's up and going. So that was just the latest, because I was a little alarmed, just the numbering of the building. But all is good. Moving forward. June 1st, occupancy move-in. So that's a good thing. Up and ready to go for next school year.
Yes, great.
That's great.
I've got a question on those updates. We've had some parents ask questions about specific activities, mostly concerns, right? Is it possible that the updates that are put in the newsletter, we can make those a little bit more meaningful to actual activities, and maybe things that are more relevant to the students and the parents? Because I think it seems like it's right now it's just a it's like a construction checklist that's not
Translated for the layman.
Yeah. We're not like if we say 50% complete, what does that mean? Does that mean we've completed 50% of the time on the schedule? Does it mean 50% of the steel's installed? But you're right, so something that's translatable to everyday language.
Okay, so I will take the PBC's report, and you're asking for more of just a summary with the newsletter.
Well, not more of a summary, translation into something that's useful to the general population.
Okay, sounds good, Robert.
Because some of the questions we've had is there was this weird activity happening, and if we have a list of maybe activities that intrude into pickup drop-off time, or activities that are being rescheduled to avoid pickup drop-off time, in in the interest of being kinder to our neighbors, things like that, that may help reduce the number of questions or concerns that we get.
Sure. Will do.
Anything else on the annex? Okay, Deepak, do you want to give it an update on PTO?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Katrina. We recently had another dad's event at Surge Pool Hall on Montrose, which was very successful and fun. Thanks to Robert for organizing that. We have our spring benefit, the Great Gatsby Gala, March 11th. I just checked today on GiveSmart. We're about 50% sold. So there's, I think, a little over 220 tickets left, and we sold just under 220. So I'm not 100% sure, but I think historically that's pretty good for being, 4 weeks out, four plus weeks out. And then just generally speaking, we still are have a sizable amount in our checking and savings accounts. So that's all I got for PTO.
Thank you. Anyone else have questions on PTO? Okay, now moving on to principal's report.
Okay, so in the principal's report, I did make more announcements for the PTO. So I do know that they are selling some raffle tickets. Those have already gone on sale. Parents that are in charge of the classroom baskets. I know parents are donating some great items for those baskets. So I think we're in the right direction. I didn't pass this through to everyone, but I do want to say for our local school council members to support the PTO. Historically, we have sold, like split the pot tickets on the night of the evening, or the big raffle, what have you. So you may be hit up because I volunteered. Any LSC member that is in attendance, I also volunteered my husband to help and sell some of those tickets the night of the event. So just a heads up if you are asked, and if you are going, it's just for a quick hour or so, just to help and support the PTO at the night of the evening. Going into more of the principal's report with competency A, making sure that we are following our school improvement plan. We have met with the instructional leadership team, have made dates for the remainder of the year. We have already completed the goals or strategies, and we're now currently working on action steps. We are moving forward with that, in addition to looking forward to the middle of the year data that we received from the STAR 360 screener, as well as the iReady information for the students in grades kindergarten through 2. So we're taking a look at the data and a little more of a deep dive on that. At the bottom bullet point, our rigor walk is scheduled for a week from today, or making it definitely, they're calling it a deeper dive from the beginning of the year. Rigor walk, we go into classrooms. We're looking for specific topics that are need to be focused on. Basically, it's making sure the standards are being taught, that the objective is aligned with the standard, the discourse between students, having teachers become more facilitators and have the discussions and learning within between the students, as well as how are they being assessed, and making sure that the students have mastered the standard and objective. So that's a little bit deeper than what we did for the beginning of the year. With standard A2, again, sort of more of that data
moving into. So you can see sometimes it does get a little repetitive in our standard A. I'm moving down to competency D, Sean. Successful start of with the safety committee. So I'm really proud of the work that we have done as a committee, and also encouraging, I do know that the flags are there, and again, keep advertising if parents would like additional flags that they have them. I think it's great because it's not as much of the signage, but it does call attention, and the feedback that I've received from the parents is positive, and it's something that we can control up until we find out more additional information. And then this week and next week, the 5 essentials, I'm moving down to competency E, the 5 essentials survey will be given to students grades 4 through 8. So it's just asking how, getting feedback from our students on how our staff is doing with teaching, the school environment, and the school culture. So I'm interested to see that information. Usually the 5 essentials survey, it's that my voice, my school survey will be given out to the parents closer to third quarter parent-teacher conferences. And at this time, we have no internal accounts of excessive checks payout over $1,000. Any questions on the principal's report?
Hey, Chris, I have 2 questions. The first one is, will there be a summary of what that survey is from, coming from the students? Is that something that would be shared?
Yeah, so it usually is shared through the SQR. Well, no, it's on 5 essentials. It will come through. So this is an Illinois state requirement, so that we will get a report on that. I know for sure, I would say more closer to the end of the year. We usually share at the beginning of the next school year. But so that does give us feedback on how parent feedback, student feedback, as well as administration gets staff feedback as well.
Oh, that's great.
So yeah, it's public. Like you can look up any school.
I think we put it in maybe a couple newsletters ago. It's from the University of Chicago. They're the ones that create the survey. So you probably know it. Then at the end of the year, it does like teacher to teacher relationship, parent to student, and or parent to administration and teacher relationship, student to student relationship, all that stuff. So it should look pretty familiar, I think, to most of you. I can add it to this newsletter again, just to give everyone a heads up that the kids will be doing over the next 2 weeks.
The other question I have is, with the new testing, are we seeing improvement, like the new standardized testing that's come in, or is it really helpful for the teachers to gauge improvement, like baselines and improvement? I know it's hard to keep track of all of the different, STAR 360s, BOI, but with all of these new changes, is it fitting the bill here? It's helpful.
One thing I'm going to start is like STAR 360, and it took me a very long time to get this out of my head. It's no longer like NWA, where it's an extensive assessment, right? So it's a screener, which is somewhat nice in the sense of, for the students, it's a 35-minute or 35-question test for reading as well as math. The nice thing that I'm hoping to see what goes into is that last month we talked about purchasing Freckle. So there will, as of March 1st, we are transitioning from IXL to Freckle, and Freckle is correlated with how students perform. So it's that, personalized learning platform for them for Freckle, and that's 3 through 6. And we did purchase the iReady platform that will support the K through 2 students. So I think this year will be sort of that growing year. And then Mr. Kennedy attended the PSAT 8, which I wanted for our students to pilot, because I started seeing the writing on the wall last spring that they possibly, don't quote me, but possibly transitioning PSAT 8 instead of the selective enrollment exam for high school assessment. So it hasn't been determined yet by the board, but I did like it because once the students get in as freshmen, they will be taking the PSAT 9. So I just want to make sure that we were a part of the pilot program and that the students were exposed to this different platform. So I would say we could probably report more next month once we take a look at the difference between the beginning of the year data that we got from the screener and iReady, as well as to take a look and do comparison with middle of the year. And this is definitely a focus when Sean and I go to principal AP meetings with the network to take a look at. We've got a data analysis that, supports us.
Great.
Great question too. I think if I could just add one thing, not to take up more of everyone's time, but the reports will be going home this week, so parents will be able to see, their student score, Star 360 for 3rd to 8, iReady for K2, and then there's the PSAT 8 report that will be going home for the 8th graders. I do agree it seems like more testing and more confusing, but we have to remember that NWA used to span over like 4 or 5 days for some of these kids. The Star 360 is a 1-day, 35 to 50-minute test, so they're usually doing it in one math class, and then it's done. So that we do like about it. It's like Chris said, it's more of a screener. So I think getting it done in one class period instead of NWA taking, 4 or 5 days, all of that jazz has been, I think, something good.
Stephen, you have hand raised?
So I'm looking at, will Freckle help or be tailored more to standardized tests? Because remember the teachers' complaints was always, not just at our school, but our schools, teach to the test. Will that help them with their standardized tests so teachers can work more on abstract learning?
Correct.
Over IXL? I mean, I would hope so, because IXL is
run its core?
I don't think it's ever. I'm a wordsmith that has no words. I'm sorry.
Well, that's a good question. So if you guys remember, I'm sure Ms. Fitzgerald remembers, Elaine, Compass Learning we had before that. All of these personalized learning platforms, they kind of run its course. So we had Compass Learning for 4 or 5 years, IXL for I think 4. It's like a video game or anything else. You get bored of it, a book, your favorite game.
That's
whatever.
basically my question, because I don't want teachers
Correct.
spending their time teaching to the test.
So the iReady is directly linked to their assessment. So it's scaffolded. So if the student moves here, the personalized learning platform moves with them. Freckle for 3rd through 8th is the exact same thing. So if they score X amount on their Star 360 math or Star 360 reading, it will tailor their.
It goes along with them.
Correct.
Oh, cool.
So,
all right, great.
Unlike IXL, where they have their own little diagnostic test, but it's a lot of the teacher kind of mapping that out for them.
And it's a lot more like certifications you have to take for things where you could just let the video run. And
exactly. Yeah. So hopefully you guys like it. If you don't, you can email Chris.
Thanks, guys.
Can I ask a quick question? Is there a link you could send to me or to anybody else that might need it? I've never heard of Freckle, and I'm new to the 360. I know it's new as well, but is there just more information I can read? I feel like you sent something home in the folders once, and I did read about it then, but if there's any additional sources.
You'll be getting a Star 360 report this week, hopefully by Friday, and it should show their beginning of the year and middle of the year, BOY, MOY, just so you have some metrics to go off of. And then what we'll do is our Freckle subscription doesn't go live till March 1st. So we'll give you guys a little bit of, education and what it is leading up to that. And then you'll start hearing your kids kind of talk about how they're using it and all of that stuff.
Okay.
So stay tuned.
Okay. Thanks.
Lori, if they do have like a parent, usually they have like a parent, kind of like a cheat sheet, 1-pager, we can definitely send that home. So I'll ask Freckle for that and see if iReady has that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Because they are new, yeah.
Anything else on principal report? Okay, student report. Isabella.
So I was supposed to hand off the baton to Isabella. We just received notification that we are going to be having another student election because Isabella will be graduating this year. And so we will have a new student representative on our local school council starting in July. Isabella, do you want to talk about some things you're going to do with Miss Sophia Dominguez? Oh, she's still in here. She may have to gone off. Is she still on? Yeah, so
she's not on. Okay.
So let me just to give you a heads up. So she's going to go around with Miss Dominguez to the 6th and 7th grade. Miss Sophia will go through the logistics of those that are interested, and Isabel's just sort of going to give a rundown of what is going to happen, what her experience, what it's been like from a kid's point of view, 20 students that are interested in 6th or 7th grade. And by the way, it looks really good on those high school applications. So if anybody has those 7th graders, encouraging them to apply.
Thank you. Okay, receipts and expenditures, nothing required. School usage, this must be Stephen Cooper.
Oh, no, it's me. So every year, the Saguenash Community Association, prior to COVID, and now it will be in person. They've had it a couple of years on virtual. They have requested to be able to use our cafeteria on May 18th for their May 16th, sorry, for their open meetings open meeting so that they can give feedback. Usually principal at Taft and myself are there, kind of give an introduction and then a wrap up of how the school year has gone. And then they usually have multiple guests, Alderman Nugent, District 17 is usually represented, and any other concerns that the community association has. It usually runs about an hour, and it's a great PR opportunity for getting the community into our building.
I agree with that. I would like it to move away from the park and back to the school. I think it seems more important that way because all the other stuff's at the park, and it's kind of laissez-faire where this would be. It seems more important. It seems like a bigger deal. So I would say do it at the school.
Can we get a motion to